Greetings, fellow detectives. Wizard Kitten here, bringing you a new Nancy Drew analysis video. Today's video is brought to you by the patrons over at Mystique Manor and by all the official Fellow Detective channel members. If you too would like to support the channel and gain access to exclusive features, check out patreon.com/wizardkitten to become a patron, or click join next to the subscribe button to become an official Fellow Detective. To say that the release leading up to the 34th installation in the Nancy Drew series, Nancy Drew Mystery of the Seven Keys, was a roller coaster would be an understatement. When I first played Nancy Drew Midnight in Salem when it released way back in December 2019, my opinion of the game and Her Interactive as a company was the lowest it had ever been. While I was grateful for the original 32 Nancy Drew games and the many years of happiness and adventure, I was absolutely devastated by the fall of the company, the horrendous quality of Midnight in Salem, and the seeming lack of care on the part of Her Interactive. There was no teaser at the end of Midnight in Salem, so many of us were unsure at the time whether Her Interactive would even continue making games. Fans would constantly ask on blogs and message boards, always to be met with the same refrain: "We have no news to share. Yet." But then, on April 1st of 2023, boy did they finally have news to share. For nearly an entire year, the marketing team came back with a vengeance. I mentioned this as part of this review because the lead up to this game was crucial in resetting fan expectations going in. Her Interactive demonstrated to the fan base that they wanted to listen to us, utilize our feedback, rebuild trust, and celebrate Nancy Drew in her entirety, not just the new games. The marketing team did a stellar job of re-engaging the fan base, making puzzles, and building hype for Mystery of the Seven Keys. As a result, I was able to go into this game experience with a level head and an optimistic spirit, rather than the bitter taste of resentment. So let's talk about the actual game. A couple disclaimers: I was part of the Mystery of the Seven Keys launch day team and did receive a copy of the game from Her Interactive for free. Thank you, Her Interactive, for this opportunity. However, all thoughts and opinions are still my own, and I have no intention of holding back any opinions, positive or otherwise. This is an honest review after all. I would also like to add that my opinions on this game are quite literally just that: my opinions. We are all going to have different thoughts and perspectives on Mystery of the Seven Keys, and these are mine. I firmly believe that we can have a cordial discourse on this game, regardless of how we feel, and that all opinions on it are valid. I tried to word my opinions as thoughtfully, respectfully, and constructively as possible, and I hope that our dialogue can be truthful and considerate. Final disclaimer: this video is my honest, spoiler-free review, meaning that I will not reveal any specific plot, character, or location information that was not already revealed in the trailer. There will, of course, be no culprit or puzzle solution spoilers, and I will keep all information vague. However, if you are looking for a more comprehensive review of the game in which I use specific examples to support my claims and opinions, I direct you to my comprehensive, honest review in the card in the upper corner and in the description. This review also does not include any culprit or puzzle solution spoilers, but may discuss some plot details, characters, or puzzles that are not revealed until later in the game. But for now, let's proceed with this spoiler-free review. Now, if you are unfamiliar with how I do my reviews, allow me to briefly summarize. I grade the Nancy Drew games on 5 separate categories: plot, characters, setting and design, entertainment and gameplay value, and music and vibe. Each of these categories is scored on a scale of 1 to 10 with a final total possible score of 50. I then assign each game a letter grade as well. Let's go in reverse order this time, starting with music and vibe. The game's soundtrack and the overall mood of the game are the principal components of this category. Tracks should set the mood for each location and moment of the game, in addition to reinforcing the game's setting. Furthermore, the game's intention with respect to vibe should be abundantly clear. For example, if a game is supposed to be scary, then a frightening, unsettling vibe should be present throughout. I will say that this category is pretty hit and miss for me. There are some tracks that I absolutely love and some tracks that I find repetitive and underwhelming. There are some times that the vibe and atmosphere are nailed, and times where the intended purpose really does not land. Let's talk about the positives first. There are several tracks in this game that I adore and are exactly what I'm looking for in a Nancy Drew soundtrack. They are distinct and unique, and I can tell that they were actually composed. Beyond this, I can hear the culture of the game in the instrumentation and even hints to the game's story in the composition. There are several tracks that effectively capture a mysterious bohemian sound with a clock-like metronome rhythm, and they are perfect. As far as positives for vibes and atmosphere, there are some locations that are meant to feel creepy and unsettling, some that are meant to feel warm and inviting, and some that are meant to feel a little goofy and fun. I think at different times throughout the game, all of these were successfully achieved. On the other hand, there were some locations that just felt flat and uninspired in comparison, like they didn't get nearly the same love or attention. There are a handful of locations where the music tracks fall into the same trap of repetitive, sort of mind-numbing tracks that Midnight in Salem was infamous for. I understand that these locations are supposed to feel more like modern public stores, like when you walk into a mall and basically hear elevator music playing. I get it, but I don't like it. Especially in a game when I'm stuck in the same location trying to solve a puzzle and the exact same sound keeps buzzing in my head. It also just doesn't feel unique or like it has character. If a track is going to be modern, I would much rather have something like the techno tracks Modern and Pop from Shadow at the Water's Edge. Still techy and upbeat, but clearly original and still in line with the theme. And in terms of atmosphere and vibe, there were some times that I was supposed to be scared, and I wasn't. I will say there is one jump scare that definitely got me, but the actual haunting elements that were supposed to be scary kind of made me laugh. It was at least in a fun way and not in a this is laughably bad way, but it just wasn't quite right. I probably shouldn't have been cackling in glee, my heart should probably have been racing instead. I also fully understand the intention and practicality of having one song per location and having the songs immediately switch when Nancy moves to a new place, but I find it incredibly jarring and distracting. While having a song tied to each location can help transport us there in our minds when we hear it, practically speaking, it doesn't work as well from a gameplay standpoint if taking one step is enough to change the vibe entirely. I would rather have a collective and cohesive soundtrack where all the pieces work seamlessly together and can all conceivably convey the target location, unless a space is entirely closed off. Just something to consider moving forward. Overall, the music and vibe in this game is drastically improved from Midnight in Salem. At best, I was impressed and genuinely pleased, and at worst, I was a little distracted or underwhelmed. If my opinions were a scale, I'd be tilted in a positive direction, which is why I'm giving the music and vibe of Mystery of the Seven Keys a 6 out of 10. Not great, not bad, but pretty middling in the grand scheme of things. Next, entertainment and gameplay value. Overall gaming experience is addressed in this category, particularly the ease with which players can navigate the game as well as replay value. A game that is choppy and incoherent or a game in which players feel removed would not receive a good score in this category. An immersive experience, in contrast, would yield an excellent score. The flow of the game is also considered, as are the puzzles that the game includes. Do puzzles interrupt the game and seem out of place, or are they integrated nicely into the plot, serving a defined purpose? Are the puzzles entertaining and adequately difficult without being impossible? If these questions can be answered in the affirmative, then the game is likely to receive a good score in this category. This is the category where I have the most critiques, but let's begin with the positives. The dual navigation system was really cool, though I personally found the point-and-click option pretty clunky. I switched entirely to the modern navigation early on, and once I got used to it and got the mouse sensitivity where I wanted it, it was fantastic. The game was clearly designed to be played this way. The UI is also significantly better. Instead of bland white shapes, the inventory has a nice style. Nancy's magnifying glass has returned, and Nancy's phone tablet works great as a central hub for information. The camera is fun, and having the postcard feature gave me an actual reason to use it. Having a task list was massively helpful, and the idea of having subtasks was brilliant. It's also great having a hint feature, and the return of Nancy's journal was incredibly helpful for recalling important information and keeping everything in one place. I know some people have been running into glitches, but I personally only ran into one, and it was sort of my fault for trying to insert a key at the wrong time. When the screen froze, I was able to force quit the game, but it autosaved just a short time before, so it wasn't too terribly tragic. And as far as immersion, I was so happy. This might be the biggest improvement from Midnight in Salem to Mystery of the Seven Keys. I knew so little about Prague going into this game, and I was relying on this game to help me learn, and boy did it. Prague's culture and history is absolutely central to this mystery. Credit where credit is due, Her Interactive. I came out of this game experience feeling like I understand Prague and knowing dozens of facts about Prague that I never knew before, and I am really grateful for that. Finally, let's talk puzzles. There were several puzzles that I enjoyed in this game and found incredibly effective. The puzzles that I did enjoy were fun because they were engaging and all the information that I needed to solve them was readily apparent. And now for my critiques for this section, which all have to do with the puzzles. I'm going to be honest. About midway through the game, I was close to tears. Maybe that's dramatic, but I started to feel so incredibly disheartened after being unable to figure out puzzle after puzzle after puzzle. I am at least grateful that all of the puzzles have a defined purpose and they didn't feel like mundane chores, but some of them were so difficult or poorly explained that I started to feel deeply sad, and that just isn't how I want to feel when playing a Nancy Drew game. I want to feel accomplished and like I was able to successfully tackle a difficult problem, not like I'm dumb. Here's my issue. Challenging puzzles in and of themselves are not a bad thing. I want challenging puzzles in my Nancy Drew games, but I also want to know how to solve them. The solution can be tricky, but the logic or the instructions or the necessary elements should not be tricky. How can I solve a puzzle if I don't know that a piece is missing? How can I solve a puzzle if I've missed a crucial step, but I'm unaware? How can I solve a puzzle if there are multiple correct solutions, but the game only accepts one and that was not made clear? How can I solve a puzzle if a piece snaps into place as if it is correct, but it's not? I ran into every single one of these issues and found myself completely relying on the hint system to the point where, again, I doubted my ability to solve puzzles at all. Moving forward, here is what I would like to see to remedy this issue. In the original Nancy Drew series, many of the included puzzles were well-established puzzle types. It wasn't uncommon for Nancy to encounter a jigsaw or slider puzzle, a Sudoku, or a simple code. When presented with this kind of puzzle, most people already understand the internal logic of what needs to happen. These kinds of puzzles rely on prior knowledge and experience, so in most cases, no further explanation is needed. In contrast, Mystery of the Seven Keys seemed to have almost entirely original puzzles. This is fine, great even. I applaud the creativity, and I'm sure it was so tough to come up with a wide variety of fun, engaging, challenging, and original puzzles. I am truly thankful for that effort. But if you're giving me an original puzzle, then you need to explain the logic fully because I do not have any prior knowledge and you must make sure that I have all the required pieces in my inventory before I start the puzzle. And the great thing about this is that it doesn't need to be obvious to work. Nancy can use incredibly vague statements like, this still doesn't look right, or, I think I need more information on this, or, this looks right. While these were included in some of the puzzles, there were many very large, difficult puzzles that had no verbal cues whatsoever, but desperately needed them. I implore the team moving forward to use more vocal cues from Nancy to assist in puzzle solving. That was a really long soapbox, but this is easily what impacted my enjoyment of the game the most, and therefore is something I would really like to see addressed in the future. Again, a Nancy Drew game should not make a grown woman want to cry in frustration. Even though there are so many more positives in this category, the poor intuition and lack of instruction impacted the gameplay experience significantly for me. I'm going to give this category a 7 out of 10 because I'm trying to be fair and I know that a big part of the lack of enjoyment is personal on my behalf. I like to solve puzzles on my own and feel some ownership over the game. If that's not your thing and you have no problem using the in-game hint system, a walkthrough, or the strategy guide to breeze through, then you'll probably have a great time. It's just really important to me to be able to accomplish these tasks mostly independently. And because I couldn't, on Amateur Sleuth no less, I have to be honest in my scoring. I'm also giving it a 7 out of 10 rather than a 6 out of 10 because I do think I will have fun with it on replays now that I know the logic system of all the puzzles. I'm curious to give it another go, but that's how I'm ranking it for now. Next up, setting and design. This category takes into account the location of the game and how well it is executed. Is the location evident? Does the player actually feel like they are in that location? Does the location make sense for the plot of the mystery? Are the game environments well designed and pleasant to look at? All of these questions must be answered positively in order for the game to receive a good score in this category. Mystery of the Seven Keys is a large game with multiple locations to explore, which is pretty exciting considering the lack of exploration in Midnight in Salem. I have already gushed about how Prague was done so much justice in this game. So we're already looking at a fairly decent score in this category, but we must also consider whether or not the environments are well designed and pleasing to the eye. For the most part, I'm happy to say that I think they are. There is no denying that some of the locations in the game are some of the most beautiful buildings the Nancy Drew series has ever seen, if not the most beautiful. I was also skeptical about some of the environments in the trailer, but I think they looked much better in the game. Even if not all of the environments had character to them, they all were at least rendered well and pleasant to look at. There weren't any obvious issues, items that looked like they were floating or clearly unfinished spaces. Everything looks decent enough, which is a huge step up from Midnight in Salem. Getting more into detail, I think the game looks much better at night than it does during the day. During the day, everything looks flat. There is a distinct lack of shadow or depth, which sometimes made me feel like I was wandering around in a big box. There's also the obvious point that some of the faraway buildings and graphics, like the birds, often look pretty blocky or overly simple, but I can overlook that because it doesn't detract too much from the game. Additionally, there are some spaces that are far more decorated than others, which means that some spaces feel pretty bland in comparison. In the spirit of real honesty and a belief that Her Interactive is willing to make some improvements moving forward, there are a couple nitpicky details that I think would make the environments feel more cohesive or finished. In general, many of the environments still have this feeling of objects simply being placed instead of carefully designed. I have seen other games made with Unity where the objects aren't so stark in comparison to their environment, so this is something I'd love to see improved in the future. Also, I am still really bothered and distracted by the repeating townies situation. I fully understand the intention and concept behind filling in a public space with NPCs. It makes it feel more like a public space. It makes it feel like people are actually there. Except it doesn't when those people are literal clones of each other who do not speak and who stare into the void with lifeless eyes while occasionally moving a limb or two. In my opinion, either significantly reduce the number of background NPCs, make them cleaner, and don't clone them, or don't have them at all. It's not helping the goal of realism, and I find it silly. All that being said, I think I can confidently give this game a 7 out of 10 for setting and design. It makes me feel like I'm in Prague, the graphics are strong overall, and at least a handful of the environments are beautiful, unique, and feel complete. There's still room for improvement and things I would change, but this is a huge step up. I was really pleasantly surprised by this category. Next, characters. This category covers character interaction and the pleasantness of the exchanges. Are the conversations natural and easy to follow? Are important pieces of information revealed by talking to characters, and do all of the characters add something to the game? The characters themselves are also scrutinized in this category. In order to receive a good score in this category, the game must have an adequate number of interesting characters that make you think or feel strongly and that contribute something meaningful to the overall story. This is an interesting category for me because I definitely see glimmers of hope in this game for the characters. What I will say though is that I think we need to consider quality versus quantity. It's pretty cool to have 9 physical characters in a game, but if you can't dedicate enough time and resources to make each of them fully developed, then I question whether 9 characters is necessary. The physical presence of all but one character is important to the story in some way, but for the most part, our energy spent getting to know the characters is spread quite thin. I would say that we get to know the personalities and histories of 3 characters pretty well, but the rest of the characters mostly have one attribute. I don't mean that in an all or nothing way, because of course there is more than just one attribute for each character. What I mean though is that even the little details don't necessarily add up to someone being a whole person. There are also some attempts to add backstory or intrigue to a character, which I appreciate, but they fall kind of flat. I also think that much of the dialogue reads as just a step above cliché. There are some phrases that the characters use that just simply do not sound like a real person would say them. It's very stylistic, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. I think I'm just personally not a fan. The voice actors honestly did a fantastic job with the writing because I think they generally make the most of it. The personalities come through in their voices, even if the lines sound a little stilted to me. But on that note, the voice acting for Nancy does not transcend the stilted lines. Nancy's dialogue is easily the worst in the game, and unfortunately, it's only made worse by what I can only assume was the vocal direction, because it's incredibly consistent and not in a good way. Basically, every time Nancy speaks, she sounds like an AI. Her dialogue is a classic example of telling me everything instead of showing me. Nancy says the most obvious things, often speaks unnaturally slowly and with unnatural enunciation. There is also a near constant upswing on the intonation at the end of sentences and often even in the middle of sentences. Near constant, and it's distracting. She basically always sounds chipper, like nearly always, and she is often not in situations where she should sound chipper. Whether she's meeting someone for the first time, confronting them, or interrogating them on sensitive information, she almost always sounds the same. The combination of poor writing for Nancy, lack of choice for her dialogue, and the strange repetitive intonation often brings the conversations down several notches because she is at least half of all the conversations we engage in. I am trying to be polite but constructive here because this was an issue in Midnight in Salem as well. I appreciate all the time and effort that goes into voicing a character, and I do not think the blame falls solely on the voice actor. But of all the characters in the game, the main character shouldn't sound fake. Nancy is omnipresent in the game, so she needs to sound normal. We also need to talk about how the characters look. I will confess that I think I was a little harsh in my trailer reaction, but I also think that's because the characters look better in-game than they did in the trailer. I still have some nitpicks, but on the other hand, there are some characters that I have absolutely no complaints about. The clothing textures were also fantastic across the board, which was exciting to see, especially considering the upgrade from Midnight in Salem. Overall, in terms of graphics, I was pretty impressed. Finally, phone contacts. This part was pretty underwhelming. We have Frank and Joe, Ned, and Carson in our docket, but we really only talk to each of them once. You can also go the whole game without talking to Carson, which would be a real shame. We can sometimes text the characters, which I guess is more realistic, but means we miss out on the opportunity to hear their familiar voices and stellar voice acting. Any additional phone contacts are really only talked to once, sometimes twice. The phone conversations feel more like an afterthought than a priority, and again, quality over quantity. Pare it down, give us like 3 phone contacts, and make the most of them. Ultimately, I think I'm going to give the game a 6 out of 10 for characters. There are 4 characters that I legitimately like and find memorable, but the other 5 and the phone contacts are not as strong as they could be. There are too many weak links and too many other character issues for me to go any higher. But once again, this is still a huge improvement from Midnight in Salem. And finally, the most important category in my opinion, plot. The main focus of this category is the storyline of the game and whether or not it holds up to scrutiny. Is the story easy to follow? Is the plot original but still believable? Are there several subplots that fit in well with the main plot and even add to it? In addition to the storyline, this category also considers how cohesive the game is as a whole. If the game is sporadic or overly complicated, it would not receive a good score in this category. To make a long story short, Nancy is invited to Prague to solve the mystery of stolen and fake gems in an heirloom necklace. Through snooping and interrogations, she discovers there is more to the mystery than just a simple theft. Nancy gets involved in uncovering cybercrime and forgeries, learns of the history of Prague, explores lore and alchemy, and delves into the importance of tradition. I think all of the elements of the plot ultimately work together and are explained reasonably by the end, which is good because this story has a lot of moving pieces. However, I do not think that the order made a great deal of sense, and there are still several threads and inconsistencies that are not covered or explained adequately. I also think the motivations of the characters are often messy or not fully developed. By the end of the mystery, I understood the culprit motive, but it took me some time and some talking through. In general, in mystery writing, I think that the more simple the motive, the stronger the mystery. The culprit motive and the motives of all the suspects leading up to the culprit reveal often seemed multi-pronged. This makes it more difficult to truly hone in on suspects and dilutes the overall theme of the case, which I also don't think was very clear. If we take the culprit motive at face value, I can see a theme, but I don't think it is the theme, because I think there was almost a different theme for every character. It's hard to explain without giving away any information, but if you've played the game, perhaps you know what I mean. It often felt to me like there wasn't an internal reason for a lot of the events that unfolded. They weren't always connected to each other, and sometimes they just happened without much logic. There were several moments during my initial playthrough where I questioned what was happening and why, and that really shouldn't be the case. All that being said though, I believe that the plot overall was not half bad. In the middle of the game, I was really starting to doubt that everything would come together, but the last 2 hours of the game or so saved it for me. Ultimately, they landed the ending, even if the path to get there was a little convoluted. I also appreciated the originality of the case. Even on Nancy's other European adventures, she's never really had anything like this one. It was probably closest in style to Phantom of Venice, with maybe a dash of Captive Curse and Danger by Design, but it is clearly its own unique entity, and I applaud the creators for that. Ultimately, I think this category is going to need to be another 6 out of 10 for me. I appreciated the improvements in storytelling and everything came together by the end, but there's still some consistency, logic, progression, and theme issues that needed some tightening, in my opinion. But that is all of our categories, which means we now have our total score. We have a 6 for plot, a 6 for characters, 7 for setting and design, 7 for entertainment and gameplay value, and a 6 for music and vibe, giving the game a total score of 32 out of 50, resulting in a letter grade of a D+. Now, before anyone freaks out, that may sound harsh, but remember that this scale is the one that I use for all of the Nancy Drew games to compare the Nancy Drew games to each other. For context, Midnight in Salem got 12 out of 50 from me, so this is a tremendous improvement. For further context on my own personal objective ranking, not my personal favorites ranking, Mystery of the Seven Keys places higher than 6 of the original Nancy Drew series, including Secrets Can Kill, Secret of the Old Clock, Creature of Kapu Cave, Ransom of the Seven Ships, The Shattered Medallion, and then of course Midnight in Salem. In my original scale, this game is probably closest in quality to Trail of the Twister, which received a score of 34 out of 50, so just a smidge better. So what does that all mean? It means that Her Interactive listened to their fans and pulled off what might just be the turnaround of the century. I am truly impressed at how much better Mystery of the Seven Keys is compared to Midnight in Salem. 20 points better, in fact. Its score is even high enough that it's comparable to the original 32 games. And that, my friends, is saying something. If you are a fan of Nancy Drew and of the original series, you may have mixed feelings about the direction the games have taken, the new style, and what are understandably considered some pretty drastic changes. While Mystery of the Seven Keys is a massive improvement, it is still a product of this new style of Nancy Drew game. Rather than feeling a part of the original 32 games, it feels like it was inspired by those games. The universe is the same, and thankfully, references to the past games abound, but it is still virtually an entirely new series. If Midnight in Salem was The Secrets Can Kill, then this was the Stay Tuned for Danger. And I'm happy to say that if Her Interactive continues on this trajectory, their next game could have a similar leap in quality and be the next Message in a Haunted Mansion. Now that would be cool. By the end of my Midnight in Salem review, I felt like I was writing a funeral speech. I had so little hope moving forward that my only comfort was knowing that I could replay the original 32 games and continue to celebrate them with you all. And I am pleased to say now, I no longer feel hopeless. You guys, they turned it around. This game still does not have the charm of the original series, and I don't know if this new style ever will. But it wasn't a bad game. There are things I would change and elements that need improvement, but this game was eminently playable, and I had fun. Except when I was almost crying over puzzles, but we've covered that ground already. If you are looking for a classic Nancy Drew mystery in the style of the original 32, then this game probably isn't for you. It doesn't have the same nostalgia, charm, detail, or even heart, but it is an admirable effort, a significant improvement, and a fun game. It is the most expensive Nancy Drew game that has ever been released at a whopping $32, but it's also the most graphically intense game and the longest Nancy Drew game ever released. It took me about 13 hours to finish. It is a long one. If you're a Nancy Drew fan and you are willing to try something new, then I can comfortably recommend this game to you. If you're new to the series and enjoy mysteries and adventures, I think you'll have a fun time. It is important to consider looking at the specs for the game, however, because it is intense and does require a fairly high-end system in order to run well. This is a huge bummer in my opinion, because I know there will be people who want to play it but can't justify the massive purchase of an upgraded system just to play it. It isn't very accessible, which is something that I hope Her Interactive considers in the future. That being said, as a long-time Nancy Drew fan, we finally have a new Nancy Drew game that is comparable in quality to some of the originals. That is incredibly exciting to be able to say. But what do you think, fellow detectives? Have you played this game yet, and if so, what did you think? Are you hopeful for a new game in the series? What improvements do you see, and what changes do you hope they make moving forward? Let a Wizard Kitten know in the comments section down below. If you really enjoyed this video, please consider hitting that like button or tipping me for the video with a super thanks next to the download button right beneath the video. If you would like to come join a fantastic group of fellow detectives at Mystique Manor as a patron for the channel, gain access to exclusive content, and support the making of more content like this, please check out patreon.com/wizardkitten. I also have channel memberships with exclusive badges and emojis to use during streams and in the comment section. If you'd like to support the channel by becoming an official fellow detective, click join next to the subscribe button. Please feel free to follow the channel on Instagram or Discord, linked in the description box down below. And as always, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more Nancy Drew and Cozy Game content. Thank you so much for watching, fellow detectives. I will see you soon.